Hello and welcome to another painting video. In this video, I'll be painting a unit for a brand new Age of Sigmar army, the Ironjawz. I've had my eye on this army for quite some time, so here it is. I'll be painting a unit of brutes, as you can see here. Most orcs will be painted the same way, but I will make more videos when I get to the Gorguntras or other monsters. Also note that in this video I do not explain how I painted the lava bases and OSL. That will be in a separate video which can be found on my channel. Let's begin, shall we? I'm starting off with 3 different flesh tones for my orcs. The first one is pretty neutral and is base coated with Death World Forest. This goes over a black primer, but the color of the primer doesn't really matter in this case. I then shade the flesh with Athonian Camoshade. This darkens the flesh a little, but we get back with Death World Forest on the raised areas to lighten the flesh. This is also the base for the highlight, so I do leave some of the flesh darker where the light won't really hit it. I layer on Elysian Green on the raised areas, using the previous step as my guide. My second layer is Ogryn Camo. I personally like to feather on these layers as it gives some rough texture, but you can also apply it smoother, whatever you prefer. And I end with a highlight of Dorn Yellow. This is a pretty neutral orc flesh tone. It's not as bright, and because these are big orcs, I don't really want very bright greens as opposed to if I were painting goblins. The next orc flesh is painted with Castellan Green. This will be a bit of a darker flesh tone. I shade with Biel-Tan Green, which will make the flesh look really saturated. I come back with Castellan Green to tone down the brightness of the flesh. I do like the shading though, that's why I'm using this shade paint here. I layer the flesh with Deathguard Green, again using the previous layer as a guide. I repeat the process with Orc Flesh, which brightens the skin a bit. And I end with a highlight of Nurgling Green. Although this flesh is darker than the previous one, I did add some bright colors in the mix. And that's what's really fun about painting green skin. You can toss in every green paint you have and just mix and match. There are so many combinations. For the third flesh tone, I went for some Army Painter paints. I first base coat the flesh with Woodland Camo. I then shade the flesh with Coelia Greenshade, which is a nice green bluish tone and fits really well with the base coat. I come back with Woodland Camo to set the base for the layering of the skin. The first layer is Camouflage Green. And the second layer is Necromantic Flesh, which is an awesome name and really brightens the flesh. And I end with a highlight of Grotesque Green on the flesh. I've noticed that the Army Painter paints are not just copies of Citadel paints hue-wise. They do have their own thing going on, which is great. Really adds to the paint options. The colors I used here all were part of a triad of greens, which work really well together. They apply very thickly though, so I do recommend you water them down quite a bit. Now that we have some color on the orcs, let's take a look at the pants. These I paint with XV88 and shade with Agrax Earthshade. I apply a layer of a mix of XV88 and Zandri Dust. And highlight with Zandri Dust. Now this is not very exciting, but it's better to paint the pants just before you get to the armor. I went with a tan leather look, but you can really do anything you want here. I want my orcs to have a blue tinted cold looking armor, which will offset the warm lava OSL later on. I first base coat all the armor with Incubi Darkness. I then layer on Dark Reaper. I focus on the big open panels or edges of the many dents in the armor. There's a lot of odd surfaces in the armor, which makes it actually really easy to paint. I layer on Thunderhawk Blue next. I roughly layer it on as I like the sketchy looking style, but apply however you like it. Focusing on the edges that fall into the light, I add Verizian Grey to the armor. And I end with some blue spots of Blue Horror to really sell the reflectiveness of the armor. The way I painted this armor, it looks very busy, but a lot will be covered with either some yellow markings or the warm lava OSL, so I'm not too worried about it. I am not a fan of the bright yellow armor that the army has on the boxes, but I like to incorporate some yellow on the models. With Jokero Orange, I freehand some fun patterns on the armor. This can be stylized fire, zigzag teeth, or orky skulls. I actually had quite a lot of fun here. With Averland Sunset, I traced the freehands that I made. Because they are orcs, I've included lots of big and blocky designs to make it easier for myself, and I think an orc would not be very subtle with art in any way. I shade the yellow markings with Athonian Flesh shade. With Dirty Yellow from AK Interactive, I layer on more yellow on the markings. I focus mostly on the tips, so there's a little gradient going on with the shade. And I finally add a highlight of Ice Yellow. Dorn Yellow will also work just fine. These make the orcs look a little bit like hot rod cars, which I find extremely funny. You can use the same recipe to paint the entire armor yellow. I actually have not tried that, so I have no idea if it will look good. For the weapons and remaining bits I want metal, I am trying out a new army painter paint called Cobalt Metal. I really like the blue hue on this metal paint and it applies very nicely. It fits with the bluish armor of the orcs and will be a great offset of the warm lava OSL. I'm really a fan of this metal color. I shade the metal with Known Oil and highlight with Runefang Steel. Finally, I add a watered down shade of Targor Rayshade to dirty up the metal just a little bit. All leather is base coated with Dryad Bark and shaded with Targor Rayshade, which will give the leather a cold brown color. I layer on Gorthor Brown and highlight with Karak Stone. I really like the way bone looks on my Dark Oath army, so I'm going to repeat that recipe here again. I first base coat all the bone with Rhinox Hide. I then highlight with Mournfang Brown. I apply all the layers in a sketchy way, which will add some depth to the bone bits. I paint Hobgrad Hide on the bone, which introduces some mustardy colors to the mix. Finally, I highlight with two colors. First is Ushabti Bone, and the second is Screaming Skull on the most raised areas. Let's look at some final details. First, I paint the nails of the orcs with Stegadon Scale Green and highlight with Frisian Grey. I add a dot of white paint to the eyes and paint the eyes with Blood Angel Red. Just a small dot is needed here as well. The torn tabards I paint with Worn Stone from Army Painter. Shade with Targor Raidshade and highlight with Brainmatter Beige. The wooden shafts of the weapons are base coated with Corvus Black, highlighted with Skaven Blight Dinge, and highlighted again with Storm Vermin Fur. And that's how I paint my Ironjawz orcs. Now, if you want to know how I paint these lava bases, stay tuned as I will post a separate video of this very soon. I'm really happy with this concept for the Ironjawz. The orcs are quite blue and cold and are offset with the colors of the warm lava. I'm sure this will be a very fun sight on the tabletop. So, for my next video, I'll be showing you how I paint these lava bases. After that, I will see what other models require a video for this army. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram, where I'll post pictures of current projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.